Awesome.
All
Grand
right.
rising, everyone.
All right. Grand
Thanks.
Rising.
I
We
see
finally
people
made it.
waiting. We made it. Good morning. Happy Friday. Grand rising. All of it. Hope everyone's doing well. Yep. Good. Yep.
All right.
How are you, Jeff? How are you today?
I'm all right. I'm doing okay. Back from doing a lot of work this week, but yeah, I'm back. So we're
You're
doing
really
good.
busy this week. Yep. Really busy. So what do we got going on? I think I took a peek and I see that it's the moon is squaring Mercury. Is that correct?
That's right. Up until just about 9:41 a.m. Pacific time, and then after that, it goes to a sextile of Jupiter. But the big thing on the radar screen again is this Uranus sweeping over all these fixed stars. And again, look what we're seeing here in the world. It's getting pretty crazy, even though we're not hearing about it all the time, but it is. And essentially what's happening right now is, we're hearing the whole election rhetoric really gets ramped up here. And I can tell you that, I'd be surprised if there isn't another assassination attempt that's actually effective on Trump if he's not very, very careful. They're really pushing the narrative right now. So that could certainly be something that we may hear more of, because they do not want this man in the White House under any circumstances, because it's going to disrupt the plan. And I've been saying this for a long, long time. And again, now we're hearing the Hitler rhetoric come out. And of course, that story has been kind of disproven on I forget who it was. It was some article came out. I think it was the Atlantic that said, he was Hitler and he said all these things, and that's been disproved. So we're going to see a lot of tension here ratcheting up as this election comes to play. And I think that's the big one on the radar screen right now. So I'm going to have a lot more to say about that as we get into our November update, which is coming up in just a few days. And, there's a lot of things brewing. So let's hope, no matter what happens in this election, I can tell you it's going to be really contested. It's going to really be contested. And the person is not going to be in the White House until January 6th. And I think we're going to see a lot of crazy stuff between now and January 6th. That's exactly what the astrology says too. Exactly.
Yeah. I just want to confirm that everyone can see and hear, Jeff. Jay Henneman is saying she cannot see or hear anything. Can someone let us know if you can see and hear us, please?
Yeah, we should be running here. I mean,
I get that we've been live for 3 minutes. We've got a lot of people joining us. Yes, Courtney's saying she can see us and she can hear us. So okay, we're good to go.
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah, because everything's going good here.
Awesome. All right. So obviously, Jeff, it's all about the election. Everything, the energy is pulsating right around this election. And how could it not be? I mean, how could it not be?
Well, that's right. That's exactly right. And I got to tell you right now, we're going to see it pulsate a lot more. And I don't think there isn't going to be a lot of election manipulation. And I still say, if Trump wins, like the chart says, it's going to be seriously contested. And I think we're seeing a huge battle here for power. Again, this is the nationalists against the globalists. It's that simple. And we're seeing that really heat up right now.
Well, I know you're going to go into this for the November forecast, but you did take a look at Trump's chart and Harris's chart a while ago. And they both have certain things going on in their personal charts, right? This is aside from the interrogation you cast about who would actually take this election.
That's right. And I got to tell you, when I look at Trump's chart, he's got Jupiter transiting the midheaven. Just that one element alone versus Harris has Jupiter in the 12th house. It's just not strong enough for her. And again, the CNN town hall, she had, a major word salad on a couple of answers, the answers she couldn't come up with. So I don't know. This is a very interesting thing how much money and power can do when you get all of Hollywood and all the celebrities pushing one agenda and the rest of America pushing another. So it's a very, dicey situation. And again, this is exactly what Eisenhower had warned about in the late 50s. He had said, we have a growing force that he called it the military industrial complex. I call it the owners, because I think Carlin had it right when he said that. And clearly this is, again, what we're seeing 80 something years later. We're seeing Uranus sweep over the Pleiades. And what do we got? We got trouble all over the world. And another thing I want to mention is the BRICS nations. They just had a meeting with all Russia, China, and the BRICS nations, and it looks like it's going forward. And they're using the terms de-dollarize. Well, what does that mean, really? That means that they're rejecting U.S. Treasury bonds. And I can tell you that is not something that is going to be good for our economy. It could crash this economy, or it could bring war. As I always said, prosperity, recession, depression, war seems to be the cycle. And that's pretty much where we're at right now. And let's hope that doesn't happen, because it could be one news broadcast away with all the energies I'm seeing going on between now and spring. And isn't this interesting, too, that we have the second Pluto return is going to happen right in December? Or I should say the final Pluto return on the sidereal of the United States. So when you look at this, and also we got to lead up to January 6th, who's ever inaugurated, you're going to see a lot of trouble here. There's no question, in my opinion. And I think this is going to be probably a very violent election, and things could really cut loose.
Yeah. Sad. Really sad. When you talk about the energies that we have, like collectively, if we were all, I feel like, well, first of all, yesterday you were talking a lot about the demonic forces, right? When we were speaking about various things, and questioning why these demonic forces have so much power here.
Well, again, you look throughout history, and it's just pockmarked with wars. And I have to say, there's, I've been studying some really interesting stuff in the Vedic astrology, especially in the Old Nadi. And one of the things it talks about is entering this physical realm, particularly the earth realm. And it does seem to be blended with good and evil. And the Garden of Eden stories, I've mentioned this many, many times, seem to be a lot more true than we know. And I believe the evil spirits are literally embedded right at the molecular or creational level, even deeper than molecules and atoms and all this building blocks that physics talks about. I think what's happening is they're right in the essence of physical creation, where spirit gets put into matter or concretized into matter. And this is why we always see it. And one of the things that supported that was the astral body, which is the next layer out from us, seems to be the one that keeps reincarnating and reincarnating. And this is why the genetics and the parents and all these things keep showing up in the astrological charts. And once that dissolves, that's when we escape from Alcatraz, so to speak, and move on to other realms. Or at least we escape the bondages of the karmas of the family or karmic lineages. So it's really deep stuff, way beyond anyone's full ability to make an analysis of. But I would tell you that there's something to that one. And when you go back and you look at the amount of violence and amount of craziness that goes on in this world, it's absolutely crazy. I always say each war is new and unique ways to kill people, right? They come up with new weapons, new ways to win a war. And it becomes more and more hideous and volatile every time. And maybe that's why we see this repeatedly on this planet. And I do believe we do head into golden ages and the silver ages and stuff that we had talked about. And that's very, very likely to happen, but I don't think it's going to happen for another 3,000-4,000 years. Everyone thinks we're heading into the Aquarian age any seconds. And I can tell you, it's not going to be electrical vehicles and windmills. It's interesting. I just went by Palm Springs yesterday, and I can tell you on the 10 freeway, I'll bet 50 to 60% of those windmills were not turning. Why? I hear the maintenance on them is crazy. So to think we're going to run ourselves off of windmills and solar power at this point, I think is kind of a pipe dream. I really do. And I couldn't believe how many of those windmills sit inactive. And that's because they're really expensive and a lot of time to maintenance them. But it's the green new way. As meanwhile, they direct energy weapons and screw up with the weather constantly.
Right. Deborah's making a correction here. She's saying the inauguration's not on the 6th. It's and then Kevin jumps in and says the certification is on January 6th. And
that's right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know all the details, but I can tell you between the election and the inauguration date, whichever exact date it is, which we'll be looking at that on the astrology as well, that's when we're going to see, I think, a lot of trouble. Because I think whoever gets elected, and I think it's going to be Trump, I really do, it's going to be strongly contested, and there's going to be a lot of resistance against it.
Yeah.
And again, parallels the Pluto return, the final Pluto return on this country.
I was just going to bring that up. The Pluto return, huge. Yep. The final Pluto return.
Here's a little hope for us. Rome actually survived 3 Pluto returns. Why? And I'm not a historian, but I think Rome was formed officially somewhere around 750 BC. That's 757 is one number I've heard too. There's different historians that talk about different time periods. And then we had a Pluto return, which would have been right around 0 AD. Think about it, 250 years approximately, right? Then 250 years after that, which would have put us at about 250 AD or 245, 250 AD, it had a second Pluto return. And then the third and final one is what destroyed or broke up Rome. Now, it did go through huge convulsions each time, but that's one of the empires that's probably best described as exemplifying what happens on Pluto returns. If you go back in history, there does seem to be a lot of dissension that happened. There was divisions and all kinds of various different wars. And again, this is modern times. It's not the Roman times. And when we look at what's happening in the United States right now, the infiltration that we've seen, the destruction of the economy, never before have we been even close to this kind of debt. We've now surpassed $35 trillion in debt. That is absolutely unsustainable. And in the meantime, they want to just shut down all the energy grids and force us to buy electric vehicles. When I ride, there's no place like California to see traffic. Let me tell you that one. And when you look at the sea of traffic, I came in last night late, and I got to tell you, I think I did, maybe 5 miles an hour for about 45 miles just to get home in the traffic because I happened to hit close to rush hour. And rush hour in California is from 3 o'clock until about 6:30. It's not 5 o'clock. It takes that long. And I don't see how they're ever going to eliminate all these trucks and cars using fossil fuels, or what I would call petrochemical, because I don't believe they're fossil. And it's overwhelming how many vehicles are on the road. And it never stops. It never stops here. That's why the only way to get around this place is a motorcycle. And I'm telling you, if they ever cancel lane splitting in California, I'm leaving. That's it. I'm out of here.
Got it. Just be careful. Be careful. Well, Rhonda's making a comment here. The best way to get through this final Pluto return is to remember that cool heads prevail. Keep it cool. Keep it cool. Yeah.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. I agree with that too. So I want to bounce over to, I always try to take these in order. Justin has a very nice question here, wondering what you two do in handling in your personal life the awareness that comes with astrology and what you're seeing in the world, good and bad, of course. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's another interesting topic, that Vedic astrology always tended to confront, and that is, what do you do with this information? Well, some of the more spiritual yogis that I've studied with always say you're supposed to take the good with the bad, right? And again, I use the analogy of driving a car. If you know what's coming at you, you can't stop it. but you can certainly react to it in an appropriate way. And I really believe that's it. Like right now, I got Mars retrograding in my 12th house, and man, can I feel it? I'm just like wiped out. And what do I do with that information? Well, you can do a lot. There's always something the mind can do. And that is like, I take it more easy. I'm backing off on certain things and definitely getting more rest, doing more reflexology. I love reflexology. And, you just be more aware of where your energy's at and you compensate. Just like if you've ever driven in really icy roads, you either stay off of them or you compensate the way you drive mighty carefully. So it's the same analogy. And, there's a lot of different approaches. Some people don't even believe in astrology. And I always laugh because, they're usually having some incredible crises and this chart shows it. And they say, yeah, but you don't realize so-and-so did that. And I'm like, yeah, I know. But isn't that interesting that so-and-so did that right when these astrological energies happen? So a lot of ways to look at life. A lot of ways to look at life.
A lot of ways to look at it. Sometimes I feel overwhelmed having the knowledge of the astrology because it is so accurate. And sometimes, like right now, it's funny you have the Mars in the 12th, but I have Neptune hovering over me. And it is tough, like really tough, really challenging. I can see it on myself. I can feel it.
Oh, yeah, it's the Twilight Zone. It's the Twilight
Zone, but not only that, it's a combination of the Twilight Zone and wanting to seek out more spirituality. So those two are really, they're almost like fighting each other. I could feel that. It's like a boxing match. Who's going to win, right? I'm being pulled one way to just kind of wanting to veg out, and then I'm being pulled another way to like reading more text and spirituality and trying to connect that way. And it's fascinating having this in quotes access to the astrology, right? Because we're always looking at it. Like one day doesn't go by when we're not obviously talking about astrology, looking at our astrology, seeing what's to come. I know that it makes me feel hopeful because I know that no one period lasts forever. Even when you're going through a good time, then I'm like, oh God, don't let this end. This is
right.
But I know it's going to, but it's really the challenging times that it holds your hand through it, for me at least.
Yeah, just like this election and this Pluto return on the United States, it's going to go away. It's gonna end. We always push through it. The biggest thing I always look at too is just life in general. If you look back at your life and you look at the ebbs and flows, and we always get through it. And even if we don't, the consciousness lives on. And, again, I've been really enamored with this reincarnational studies I've been making in Nadi astrology. And I've been delving into a lot of different books. And I have to say, they say that the state of consciousness that we exit the body, of course, we call it death, is so important because what that does is that literally allows you to be locked in some way in that state of consciousness. Now, that doesn't mean that reasoning and logic isn't probable on the other side, because I really believe it is. But I also think that that our reality structure, what we believe, quote unquote, I always get nervous on that word belief, right? Because I always question my beliefs, or at least try to look at them as objectively as I can. Because a lot of us have ingrained responses and belief patterns that may not be based in reality. This is why psychiatrists, psychologists, astrologers, and psychics and intuitives and counselors are never going to be out of business, right? Because we're always grappling with our belief systems versus our logic and perception of reality. So this is really a cool way to look at psychology that I really, really enjoy. And that ties right into what we're talking about always, because, when I see transits, I'm just blown away at how powerful these energies are. And that's what they are. They're energies. They're not predicting the future. It's just energies. And if we look at these energies in a more objective way, like we look at other energies, and we treat them like that, I think the mind is much stronger than we realize. And there's nothing, in my opinion, more powerful than consciousness. And that overrides everything. And that's what the yogis in India and some of the ancient Tibetan lamas were talking about. And that is, they would take their karma in stride and knew that it was actually a positive thing to dissipate or ground out this energy. The whole human race seems to be going through this. I mean, when you look back in time, like Genghis Khan and the Tartarians. I was just listening about that this morning with Jason Brashear's really good podcast he put out on that. And I look at many different historical things, some of which may be accurate, some which may not be totally accurate. But one thing's for sure, humanity has always gone through ebbs and flows of trials and tribulations that have been on the verge of insanity, and then on the other end of the spectrum, on the verge of divinity, literally. So, we are really here experiencing, the earth is a really magnificent place when you really step back and look at the diversity of experiences and what goes on. And what I like, I think about studying the astrology the most is that it gives you the ebbs and flow regions. And the biggest thing it does is it gives us the conscious perception of what's happening rather than our deductive reasoning of what's happening. So that makes a big difference. It's kind of like, you can count telephone poles going down the road, but it's a lot smarter to look at the speedometer, right? So, or white lines, whichever you want to use. So, these gauges are all a way for us to handle our perception of reality. And that's the way I kind of look at it. It's maybe a healthier way to look at it.
Yeah. Yeah. And these experiences, then you're saying, are here to help us gain awareness, right?
Yeah, yes, exactly. And the interesting thing is, I was looking at is children, and looking at the parents' charts. There was a number of things that K.N. Rao had put together. He's a Indian astrologer that I really enjoyed, and he was looking at the analysis between the parents and the children, and why certain parents do have children and certain don't. And there is definitely astrological karmic imprints that show, like, some parents will have children that are just divine. They love them. Everything is great. They get along. They're the best of friends. And other ones are horrible. I mean, I've seen it. I'll never forget one time I was talking to someone, and they literally had to get a restraining order against their son. He was trying to kill him, and you hear about these things and so many different diverse conditions and situations in families. And boy, it can get like the Hatfields and the McCoys, or it can be like divinity. And you wonder, why in the heck would this happen? Well, when you look at the charts of these people, if you can get them, and I have had an opportunity to look at quite a number of them, it's absolutely amazing how accurate it is. You can see whether there's animosity between the parents and the child, or the child and the parents. And, because a lot of times everyone's perception of reality is much different. And again, it's all a game of psychology, really, or perception of reality. And it showed up in the chart. So accurate, it's creepy.
And it shows up in each chart, right? It'll show up in the mom's chart, the dad's chart, the child's chart.
It does, yeah. Like the first thing I saw in yours, so your father wasn't around, and I get this all the time in readings where people say, well, how did you know that about my dad or my mom? Well, it's in the chart. The sun is the father, the moon is the mother. Yeah.
Absent.
Right in there, yeah.
I might have been better off, though. I'll say that. No.
Well, there you go. See, and then you look even deeper and say, well, why would this be? And you look at some of the yogas, especially what we call divisional charts. And that's just a fancy, they call them Vargas in Nadi and Vedic astrology. And what they are is they take the signs and they divide them up into really detailed divisions. They're called Vargas. And there are different charts for many different things. You can see the parents, you can see success, you can see all these different things in the chart when you look at them. Of course, birth time has to be accurate or it won't be accurate. Yeah. But I'm actually astounded at how much there has to be a matrix of reincarnation, or you couldn't get the astrology to mirror this so accurately. There's just no way. And it's an area of really interesting study because I think all of us, there's no question our parents are extremely important to us. And I think most parents would say their children are extremely important to them. And, I've seen everything from, like, I've had several times where I was found, in a train station. This often happens in some of the Southeast Asian countries. But it happens here too, where we hear, people are just plain giving up. They didn't even know who their parents were. They didn't even know what day or time they were born. We had to rectify their birth chart. And, you just wonder, how can these things happen? How could a little beady baby, that just be left, and given up
for
for
dead? How did it
dead?
happen, and why did it happen?
Yeah. I was often wondering why I didn't become a dumpster baby. That's what I call them, dumpster babies. And it's really horrible, because what happens to these people is they have no reference points. And again, I've seen the foster care system is another area where I've seen children just be really mistreated, and they're just bounced around. They're totally at the effect of the state and the people that they get brought into. And again, we had 2 foster children in our family. We actually had a total of 4 or 5, but they moved on. They just weren't happy. But my younger brother, Ed, who just passed away, he was our adopted brother. And, he was just as much my brother as my 2 blood brothers are. And amazing how, I got his chart and I saw the ebbs and flows in his chart. And, you could really see where he would never meet the father. He never did. And the mother, he did have a reference to, but didn't want any contact with. And, you wonder, how can these things play out like this? Well, it's clearly you have to enter in the word karma, because if you don't, if there wasn't some pre-existing condition, God's not sitting in the sky saying, well, let's punish this one and let's make this one rich and happy, and this one over here, that, there's just no way. That there has to be a trail, just like genetics has a trail of karma. And again, I always grappled with that and said, well, geez, how can that be? But I have to say, the charts really show it. They really do.
Well, if you look at life that way, things start to shift for you, because it wasn't until probably 2 years ago when I really started to understand karma. And I don't want to say believe in it, but I just felt that it's true. My outlook just shifted. My outlook on life, my outlook on beingness totally shifted. Totally shifted. Let's jump, Jeff, to Madam K. Great to have you here today. Great to have everyone here today. Thank you so much for joining us. Madam K is asking, what does the astrology say about the alignment of the planets themselves over the next 6 months?
Well, again, that's what I've been talking about. And I'm going to talk a lot more about that in the November update. But clearly, we've got Uranus sweeping over the Pleiades. That's one thing. We have a lot of things going on. There's also progressions in the United States that I actually like coming up next year that are going to help this country a little bit. We have a Jupiter progression aspecting the sun, which is what we call a Jupiter trine by solar arc direction. And I have to say that one is pleasing to me. So it does look like we're going to see some bounce back here from the insanity that we've been in for the last 4 years. And, it's going to be a little, I think, dicey getting there. But on the other hand, that's going to work. There goes the old camera again.
Yeah, so, and you will go into this more on the November update, which we're going to try to release before November 1st, for sure. Right, and the walking wall, Ella, what does it mean that Neptune is hovering over you as far as the placement? Why don't you go into that for a minute, Jeff?
Let me understand that. What was the question again?
The walking wall is asking, what does it mean that Neptune is hovering over me? Because I said that Neptune is
yeah. See, in location astrology, what happens is the planets, all of them, go retrograde except for the sun and the moon. And sooner or later, you're going to get Venus to go retrograde. Mars is going retrograde this December. And that's a big deal because when Mars goes retrograde, which only happens every 2 years, it hovers. See, Neptune is much, much slower. Like Ella right now has Neptune stationing right over the Los Angeles area. So it's hanging there. So that's the word, hovering. And what happens is all of us can get that. And that's where, doing a detailed analysis of your chart, your birth chart, up against transits and progressions are really useful because you can see the duration of a planet stationing and retrograding, or stationing and going direct. So it's really astronomy. It truly is. And when you look at the astronomy in juxtaposition to your birth chart, and most particularly, if you live in a different place than you were born, really important, because you will get transits and progressions there that are going to be much different than you're going to see in your regular birth chart. That's called location astrology. That's why every reading, I'm always looking at, if they live in a different place, even if you live in the same place, I always look at the location astrology, because there's things that show up in there that are amazingly powerful. And again, you were born on the East Coast, Ella. So you're only getting this Neptune transiting your ascendant because you live where you live, you see? So, and it's quite amazing, I have to say. I always feel a bit of a duality when people live in different places, because your birth chart will still maintain the progressions and transits that are in the birth chart. That still sticks. But the location astrology also is very, very powerful. So you kind of have a little bit of a duality of energies, and very, very powerful, and very, very interesting too. I'd have to say it's a study of energy. It truly is. And I think the more it's looked at scientifically like that and applied to the psychology of our lives, it makes more sense. You see what I'm saying? It just makes it just locks in more.
Totally, 100%. Yep. Rocky Stucci Jr., thanks for being here. How does one live a moksha-based life while balancing the physical reality of this life? The two doors, right? That's what Krishnamurti calls them, the two doors.
Yeah, the two doors. Yeah, that's a great question. Because we all feel like a Q-tip in a mud puddle living in this world, and we do. In some ways, we're all exposed to things that are, really diverse from, I think, our core beings. And that's the way this world is. It's a mixture of good and evil. And, a lot of the ancient texts had talked about how many of them had just escaped from society. They got away. They went out into the wilderness, right? Again, we hear the 40 days in Christianity. We hear the Tibetan lamas, the yogis, the spiritualists would always leave and go into private or very sanctuary type environments. And nature certainly is one thing that does that. And, the tit for tat, the constant bombardment of news and the white noise of society. I used to live in a small town, and, you always got to hear about who did what, where, and when. And I was just like, I don't care, but that's the Gladys Kravitz, stuff. If anyone remembers Bewitched, remember Bewitched? Gladys Kravitz.
Yeah.
There's a Gladys Kravitz in every town. And there's also a lot of men that do the same thing. I'd go in the coffee shops. It's all I'd hear is the constant rhetoric of who's doing what and where and all that. So yeah, it's a tough thing, and the Magus of Strovolos actually had a really good response to that. He said, these are what we call thought form elementals that all of us are putting out. And they permeate not only our auras, but believe it or not, they seem to permeate collective consciousness of the globe. And hence why maybe we see disasters. There were some pretty interesting ancient texts that talked about a lot of these disasters that seem to happen come because of the collective mindset that's emitted through our thoughts. And again, thoughts are very, very powerful. And it's really incumbent to control our thoughts to the degree that we can. And when we can't, the Magus of Strovolos always said, go indifferent to them. Just let them bounce off you. It's kind of like the rain. You put a raincoat on and just let it bounce off you, and try not to absorb it. So it's that kind of analogy, which is easier said than done, especially when people are in really challenging environments. A lot of people are working in jobs where, they'll lose their job if they don't keep putting up with the crap from the boss, and or they're in relationships or in marriages or other things that are very problematic. And they have to endure this stuff, and it's very challenging. And I know I get to look into that kind of arena every day when I do readings from different perspectives. And we've all got our stories of what's going on, and it's not easy. A lot of it's fear-based. A lot of us stay in situations because we're fearful of a change. And oftentimes when we are strong enough to allow that change to happen, that's when it happens. I invariably find the astrology shows when those changes usually line up and occur, particularly Saturn. If you just follow Saturn around through the houses, invariably I find when Saturn hits the 8th house, life changes. That's the change grenade. It's thrown into your life and it changes. The progressed moon in the 8th house. So certain doshas too in the Vedic astrology, they will bring change. Even the moon is a great time of change. When Saturn transits the moon, even when Jupiter transits the moon. Jupiter transiting the moon tends to be very positive change, but nonetheless, it is change. And it's very interesting to look at this.
Yeah, very, very, very. Some say going to the breath, constantly going to the breath really helps reconnect us to who we truly are and can take us or remind us that there are these two doors. And being here on earth, we are forced to live. Obviously, we're forced to live here, right? And endure whatever we have to endure, experience whatever we have to experience. But the reminder when we're aware of that breath, that we are something very different from what we think we are, that can help.
Breath is the spirit. That's really good you bring that up. Again, another book by the Magus Astrovolos, and I've mentioned this to a lot of people, but if anyone's not familiar with it, go get a book called Esoteric Practices. I might have it laying around. I probably don't. I'd have to look for it, but I've got it in the other room. Esoteric Practices, we'll put it on the link, is an amazing book put out by the Magus Astrovolos, also known as Daskalos by some, or Dr. Stylianos Ateschlis. And what it gets into is various breathing techniques combined with concentration techniques to train the mind and focus the mind to get out of the white noise of the world. And it's very, very spiritual and very wonderful stuff, I have to say. Like, for instance, there's a meditation I love that you look at the base of a flame of a candle. And you can even do this once you have it in your mind without a candle. And that is, you'll notice it's very blue where it consumes the wick of matter. And then as you look at a candle, especially in a darkened room, as it goes up to the top, it gets much, much brighter and more, you could say, luminous and white. Well, here's the cool thing. You can take negativity and push it through the base of the candle up into the divine upper portion of the flame. To this day, physicists cannot tell you what really causes fire. Now, they're going to say, well, it's combustion, right? It's going to be oxygen and, combustible materials. Of course, that we know that's what causes flame. But just think about the essence of fire and flame itself. We know it exists. We certainly know why it exists, but we can't explain why the energies release in certain different phenomena. And of course, that's the whole thing behind internal combustion engines. So flame has a very sacredness to it. And if anyone's ever sat and watched the fire, the flames dancing, it's very magical. And that meditation of pushing negativity through the base of the flame up into divine light is very, very powerful. And you can even, if you're working in a place where you're not happy or whatever, or in a situation, you can push that negativity up through the metaphoric flame that you can envision. And here's the interesting thing about all this stuff is it diverts the mind from where it's at in the turmoil that you may or may not be in. And then it puts it in another place. You can't think two thoughts in the conscious mind at exactly the same time. See, so that it's a diversion that now pushes the mind in another direction. So we have a lot of power with our thoughts and, the way we do. And this is why many studies have been done on prayer groups. There's things called yagyas in India where groups of people get together and they pray for people, or they'll do a healing session. And of course, Reiki and Qigong and many things are like that. And the power of thought is extremely, extremely powerful. It's the one thing we have control over. No matter what, nobody can get inside your head and tell you what to think. So if we can learn the power of directing thought and look at astrology as just energies coming at us that we are always needing to kind of be aware of and adjust to, it doesn't become predicting the future. It becomes reacting to energy, which is a totally different way of looking at it.
Yeah.
And it's our reaction that matters. And I think that's a great question that he asked, and that is that, how do we cope with this? And again, there's a lot of amazing techniques that can be used. And Esoteric Practices is certainly one book I highly recommend, and it was written by the Magus of Strovolos himself.
Yeah.
Quite a good book. Quite a good book.
Really good. Really, really good. Rhonda is saying she did Ancestry, and yes, I did some Ancestry and history beyond my dad's father, but it's non-existent. Can astrology help this search? So she's saying that she doesn't find anything beyond her grandfather on her dad's side. Can astrology help this search? Meaning, can astrology go back, and can you see through the chart other family members?
Yeah, you can, to a degree. There's a lot of fantastic claims seeing you can go all the way back to the root of the soul. I don't know how to do it, and I've never seen anybody who does know how to do it, but the claims are there. I think so much has been lost in ancient astrology that is profound, and I think only the angels truly know it. I have studied that stuff. You can go back pretty far, but here's the difference. When we're kind of exposed to the modern world of genetics and genealogy and all that, which is really quite profound. I remember Francis Crick watching a clip of him. He and Watson, of course, were the ones that discovered they got the Nobel Peace Prize for cracking the genetic codes. And, everybody was like, oh, we're going to know everything, right? And Crick got up and said, we'll be lucky in 1,000 years if we figured out just what we did. So there's a lot of mysteries to genetics and karma and family lineages that I don't think anybody's going to fully unravel. But yeah, you can see back pretty far. I usually kind of get murky once you go past 3 or 4 lifetimes. You can do it. And, I guess the main reason why is I've never seen or studied with anyone who could go back much further than that with real high degrees of accuracy. So I've actually seen up to 5 lifetimes. But, this is very interesting stuff, because these lives that we incarnate in seem to be imprints that are the karma that's coming due now. And again, there is no time. They say time is really, I always say God created time so everything wouldn't happen at once. And when you look at time itself, it's totally based on the astronomy of the earth. I mean, the daily rotation of the earth, the cycles of the sun, sunrise, noon, sunset, and midnight. You've got the lunations. You've got the yearly cycles of the seasons. And again, this is why tropical astrology shouldn't be thrown out the window, because it has also a lot of efficacy. And what's, I think, important is astrology is the study of the releasement of time in human experience, we would call the unfoldment of karma. And it's also free will in there too. So we have a lot of free will. So it's deep stuff. And, I wouldn't make any fantastic claims that, we can figure out, right back to your soul root, though I believe there was a time, if we could peel back all the layers and the veils that have been cast over astrology. I've had the opportunity to study a lot of ancient texts. I haven't studied them all, but I've studied a lot. On the Western side, meaning the Egyptian, Chaldean, Sumerian, and medieval paths that have opened up to us in the last 30, 40 years quite profoundly. And I've also really been delving into the ancient Nadi and Vedic side. And clearly there's references to secrets of the soul that are extremely deep. And some souls may be newer, and some souls may be very, very old. Some souls may incarnate thousands of times. Now, if any astrologer is honest, you're not going to be able to look at thousands of times in a birth chart. But what you can see is if the soul is very old. You could see if they're coming due. I always say when the potato is ready to come out of the oven, you can kind of see it, where they may be attaining what some of the yogis call moksha, which means his escape from Alcatraz from the reincarnational cycles. And often that is indicated by the placement of the moon and Ketu and Jupiter. So there's a lot to all this stuff. There's no doubt about that.
Yes, yes. Very interesting question here. B. Doot is asking, if someone's father was adopted as a baby, do the karmic energies come from the biological parents, or does it come from the adoptive parents when it comes to the next generation of children?
Yeah, and I run into this an awful lot, where one parent or the other, usually it's the father, was not even known to the person, and they ended up finding out that their current father, who raised them, was not the biological father. And this is often the case. And I always say the most perplexing day of the year is Father's Day. But anyways.
But I want to make sure we address this correctly, because unless I'm misunderstanding, this person is asking if someone's father was adopted as a baby. Do the karmic energies come from the biological parents, or does it come from the adoptive parents when it comes to the next generation of children? So the person's father was adopted. When we look
I thought you were talking about the person's father was adopted, but you're saying the father's was.
Yes, if someone's father was adopted as a baby, do the karmic energies from the biological parents, or
I would say the biological. The biological would always, and here's what's interesting, because still my answer would be similar, and that is that whether or not it's the father came from a different father, or the child's father came from a different father, and it really is applicable to the same thing. The sun seems to be indicative in Nadi astrology of the role of the biological father. The 9th house in a chart is often indicated as the role of the father, how the father's role would play out. And I find that the 9th house often is very accurate to how a stepfather would work, or someone who took the place of the biological father. And just like the 4th house is the mother, but the moon is the biological mother. So, and this becomes, I think, a real big issue when you're talking about adopted children or children who don't know where their parents are and were raised by other people. Because, I talk oftentimes to many readings where, people say, well, I never knew my parents. I was given up for adoption right at the hospital and signed over. And these new parents raised me. They were wonderful, or they were however they were. And I really look to the sun and the moon for the biological parents. And the role of the mother is taken over by the 4th house, which is where the sun is at midnight, and the 9th house. Now, some of the Jaimini astrologers and Parashara astrologers will use the 10th house for the father, but I find the 9th shines a little more accurately for me. And see, this is the problems with the ancientness of astrology. There's a little ambiguity when you start looking at, which methods to exactly follow. And, one of the things that I've always done is kind of kept my mind open to the possibilities of these variances. And then when I'm reading charts, I get the feedback and it nails it down. And after you do thousands of charts, you start going, wow, okay, this is more accurate. And, again, there's an old saying, God, might have confused all the astrologers as well as divided all the languages. And there seems to be a great reverence to keep humans from fully understanding all the mysteries of the souls in these incarnations during these time periods. And why I say that is because I've read certain documents, and I've also experienced myself, where the angelic forces that incarnate us do not want us to fully understand, so that we operate more with free will choice. And again, that is the divinity of free will. And I really believe, because there's so many different ways people can react to their situations. Some react very harshly and violently, and some react in a very sacred or conscious way. So, and I think that is karma too. And I see these play out with the parents in many unusual ways. It's very interesting in the yogas and Vedic astrology how you can see the animosity or agreement between parents and children. And it really shows up in the divisional charts, I have to say. Quite, and same thing with siblings, very, very deep stuff. I mean, I think all of us can agree that, our families are very deep, experiences for all of us, psychologically, as well as affecting our lives.
No doubt.
So a lot of karma there, a lot. And there's nothing more powerful than the roots you came from. It's very, very powerful.
Mm-hmm. So interesting, very powerful. Rhonda, I hear you. I hope your husband will be okay. Rhonda Wim has made an appointment with you, Jeff. Her husband has Algo opposite Sun Venus, his Sun Venus conjunction. And he's dealing with a lot in terms of his cardiac strength. So she made an appointment with you. I hope that's coming right up to look at his chart here. So Achilles, thank you for joining us. We've been seeing you too. Thanks so much. Someone is asking Mia, hi Mia, asking if you teach classes and which software is your #1 favorite.
Well, I don't have any #1 favorite, but the two I use most of the time, Parshara's Light, which you can get at GeoVision, is a really, really good, solid Vedic astrology program. I found in the Nadi astrology, it's not so easy. I have a couple of different programs, but one we actually custom wrote. I had a programmer actually custom write me a Nadi program, which I like. And it takes the progressions much differently than any other type of astrology. It basically progresses Jupiter, Saturn, Rahu, and Ketu, which again are the moon's north and south nodes. I really like Solar Fire 9. I have Kepler. I have chart wheels. Over the years, I've kind of migrated from the DOS years, if anybody remembers that one, back in the late 70s, early 80s. It was actually the early 80s, I think, when DOS finally really kicked in. And that was the first iterations of Windows. And I had a lot of old programs from that, which I actually still like. But Solar Fire 9, if anyone's doing location astrology or they're doing transits and progressions, whether you like sidereal or tropical, excellent program. Excellent program. It's purchasable at Astrolabe. It's, Astro and then LABE, like an astrolabe.com. And it's about $360. Same price for Parshar's Light, give or take. They're right in that same range. They can run on PCs or Macs. I find the PC programs, for me at least, run a little bit more smoothly. And the only reason why is they were built up on that C++ code originally. And the Mac versions are good, but they don't seem to work quite as smoothly. And again, that's because they weren't originally built on that code. But, they might be getting it good. So buy whichever one you want. But I'm actually running a Mac with parallels inside of it. So I can put all my old versions of Windows on there, which I love. I got programs that are 30, 40 years old that I can plug in and run, and pretty cool stuff. You can even run DOSBox on it. So you can run the old C:// if anybody remembers that. So, astrology programs are very important to buy. And the reason why is you're going to find if you're doing astrology by hand today, you're going to be literally achieving in a click of a mouse button. Once you cast that chart, you put in the month, day, year, and of course location, and it'll find your longitude, it'll find your latitudes of where you were born, and most importantly, the daylight savings time as well, because that was a big deal. I remember doing charts by hand, and I had a huge book. I still got it. I can see it on the shelf over there, where it would tell me which counties and which parishes would observe daylight savings time or wartime and which ones wouldn't. And of course, your eyeballs crossed trying to keep track of all this. Well, what's good about these new astrology programs is it's all there. The ephemeris is called the Swiss ephemeris. You just click on it and it'll anywhere in the world, it'll really accurately define the longitude, latitude, and the daylight savings time or not, because that's critical. If you don't, again, astrology is about time. And then you get into all this complexity of house systems. Vedic astrology uses what we call whole signs. So all these programs address this. And once you learn this stuff, you can pretty much, twiddle these programs to do whatever you want to do. I know I've really customized my programs to do, what I need to do. So it's very important.
And I know classes, you used to offer classes, but Jeff's so busy now. That's kind of that's not happening anymore.
Yeah, I used to teach astrology over at Yogi Bhajan. I don't know if anybody heard of him, but he was a yogi that came from India back in the 60s. And it was kind of what I call the Yogi Indian invasion. And he had a yoga studio over on West LA. It was called Yoga West. It's still there, actually. It's changed a lot, but it's still there. And I used to teach classes there. It was a lot of fun. But you really got to be dedicated to learn astrology. It takes time. I mean, today with all the diversity of what's so great about the internet is you can jump on the internet now and YouTube and get anybody explaining some of these terms. So you can learn the pronunciations.
It's not only about the terminology, though. To actually have a teacher who you connect with to learn astrology from, that's a whole other ball game.
Yeah, it's a whole nother world. Yeah, and I've had a lot of teachers I really didn't like in terms of ego or what they, everybody knows what they know, and they tend to become very dogmatic. It gets like a religion, it gets very dogmatic in their modalities, and they're not open to anything else. And I've always been crazy enough to be open to whatever worked, and I've studied so many different things, like the diversity between tropical astrologers and sidereal astrologers, Gemini astrologers. And I've actually witnessed in the older guys in India where they hated each other. Certain astrologers would follow V.B. Raman, others would follow Rayo, others would follow Krishnamurti, others, these different methods. And I would just sit back and watch and go how this one would, chastise the other one. And I would always just not care. I wouldn't get involved. I didn't want to dive into that fight. So I would just listen to what each one had to say and say, okay, was there any truth to these methods? And I would often find there was a lot of truth to both sides of the fence. And you, again, see which one works. It's a much safer way. So anyone starting on the path of learning astrology, just treat it as that you'll never be done. I don't think we'll ever, as this low level of consciousness that we all have is not capable of perceiving the complexity of the divine. We won't. I mean, when you look at the journey of the soul, which really is what Nadi and Vedic astrology is truly all about, you're never going to figure it out because the complexity and the angelic interaction between not only karma, but also that soul roots journey, which is way beyond just regular astrology. You have to remember our souls were created 100 dimensions above the celestial influences. So what is astrology? Astrology is not just us. It's the influences that are transmitting, I believe, through portals to the soul roots. Now you figure that one out. Good luck. I mean, that's literally in divine realms of angelic, histories of the soul. And there's many psychics in the tools who read, Akashic records and various different things, but you're only going to go so far. There's some very deep stuff going on with all of us that has an extremely deep past and quite amazing.
Yeah, very, very. Well, I know you have to go, Jeff. There are a couple other questions here that are so interesting. I want to hold them over for next time. I want to let everyone know we've been on our lives Mondays and Thursdays. Unfortunately, we have to switch over to only Thursday. It's not unfortunate, but Jeff's working on a lot of projects right now, and he has a lot of clients. So we want to switch over to Thursdays at 9. But we'll be here, so we'll see you next Thursday. Thank you to everyone, and to take good care of yourselves and whatever transits and progressions you've got going on. We can all deal with it. We'll all get through it. And thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next week. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks so much for this.